favorite platform? will be honored to do that, or glad to do it.
Yeah, sure.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. It's 2 o'clock or 1400 hours, whichever you prefer. On behalf of the Linear Foundation, it's a joy to greet you. My name is David Capes. I'm the director of academic programming here. Mark is in Los Angeles, I think, Los Angeles, the city of angels, and hopefully he will wing his way back here just very quickly and be with us soon. But in the meantime, I have the honor of just sort of leading the conversation today. I'm just going to ask questions and get out of the way. That's my best job, if I were to do that. To get us off to a great start, Charles Mickey is going to pray and ask God's blessings on this time.
Let me say welcome, and let's bow in prayer. Father in heaven, we are grateful to be here. We're so blessed. This beautiful place and opportunity, we're thankful that we can come to learn and grow in our knowledge of who you are and how you work in our world. I want to thank you for Mark and Becky, for the vision that you gave them to create a wonderful haven, a refuge here for meditation and prayer and research, for conversation and growth. To your glory, Father, bless our panelists and David as well, and all of us as we explore and learn and grow. We pray our thanks and our praise through the name of Jesus. Amen.
Thank you, Charles, great to see you. And Dan, if you would come up. We have a number of students sitting right here. I want to just welcome them especially today. Dan, tell us who's over here in this wing.
Sure. My name is Dan Enright, and I work part-time here at the library as a library assistant, but I also teach full-time at a classical school in Cyprus called Covenant Academy. And so we brought a group of students here. Today we have two classes, our sophomores and our juniors. One is a biblical interpretation class, and another is an apologetics class. And when we have the opportunity, we love to expose our students to what's happening here at the library, especially these panel discussions and the scholars that come in and speak. So just wanted to introduce you to our students over here. So.
Very good. Would you welcome them, please? Yeah. Hey, welcome, guys. Good to see you. Unlike me, their entire lives are going to be lived with cell phones and computers and AI, and they will inherit the world that you and I, many of you, leave behind. We're going to introduce our guests now. We'll start with Gretchen in just a moment, and they're going to come and take their seat. Gretchen has been with us before. She did her PhD at the University of Washington, and her dissertation was on this. It was on righteous AI, the Christian voice in the ethical AI conversation. It's very responsible AI, ethical AI. Those are big topics of conversation these days. You might know her. If you listen to a lot of technology stuff, she has been the host of Microsoft Research Podcast. How many years? Was it 5 years? All right, she's from Seattle, Washington, and she's been the host of that podcast. It's described as telling stories that bring people closer to the cutting edge of technology research. That's the way it's been described, and I think that's a great way to do that. She's a research fellow still at AI and Faith, or is that different? Okay. All right, we'll get you to say more about that in just a few minutes. But she's worked for Microsoft, Beatrice Institute, a number of other places. Would you please welcome Gretchen Huizinga? Thank you so much. And secondly, Toby, I've just met today for the very first time. We got that okay, my friend? Good. Toby Kurth is the founder and lead pastor of a church called Christ Church in San Francisco. He has been kind of involved intimately in conversation with people about the topics from a pastoral kind of standpoint. He's also the director of the Multiply Initiative for Transforming the Bay for Christ. That is not Galveston Bay, I should say. That is the bay there, the real bay in San Francisco. He has a PhD in early American history from Stony Brook University in New York. He's also the author of a book, Pilgrim Theology. I can't wait to see this. I've not seen this book, but I think we have one, a couple at the library. Core Doctrines for Christian Disciples, published by Zondervan Press. Would you welcome Toby Kurth, please? Thanks, Toby. Right down there. And in the radical middle, we're going to seat Lyndon Drake. He is a research fellow in AI at Oxford University. That's not Oxford, Mississippi. That's Oxford in England. He's originally from New Zealand, right? So you might detect a little accent, just a little accent. But he's done advanced degrees in various institutions in New Zealand, but did his PhD in artificial intelligence from the University of York. He did a BA in theology and MS in theology at Oxford, and then went on to do a DPhil in theology from Oxford as well. And he's working with Oxford. He's published a book that'll be available for you if you're interested, and I hope many of you will be, really about capital markets for the common good, a Christian perspective on capital markets. I'm kind of interested in that. I might have to explore that just a little bit. He's the co-leader of Oxford collaboration on theology and AI. Would you welcome, please, Dr. Lyndon Drake? All right, thank you guys for being here, coming all the way from Oxford and California and Seattle. All right, we're ready to go. We've got a great crowd here, and we've got more coming, and I want to say thank you to those of you who are joining us on the internet, and maybe one day on our YouTube channel, the Linear Theological Library YouTube channel. The first question today is going to be the one we often end with. We often end with a question to our lecturer, Saturday night lecturer, keynote speaker, on kind of giving us a summary of what you're going to be talking about. That's how we end. But I thought it might be interesting for us to begin that way, to find out a little bit about what he's going to be talking about. It might set a table for the resident discussion that follows. So if I could, I'm going to ask Lyndon Drake to give us a little bit of thought about that in our theme today.
Well, when I give the lecture, one of the really key things which I'm hoping to get across is an idea that first became a significant part of Christian theology in the Middle Ages. And this is the idea that the tools that we use are not merely things that we act upon, but they then also change us. And I want to think together about artificial intelligence, not only in the sense of what can we do to it, if you could even conceive of it that way, but how will we be changed, and how ought we to be changed by this new tool or set of tools. And I want us to think about that theologically first and foremost. So to draw on the long and I think deeply worthwhile Christian tradition of thinking about how we can be formed as people who are worshippers within God's world. How can we be formed well? What activities order us well, point us towards God, towards humans as those He's created and given His image to, and to the world around us that He's placed us in, that's His temple. And to my mind, this is an opportunity that arises only occasionally in history. And of course, opinions differ a great deal, but I think we could conceive of these rapid changes in AI technologies as being somewhat similar to something like the printing press. And whilst, of course, people did worry that the printing press would destroy people's ability to think and to remember, Christians also embraced the printing press as a way to particularly spread the scriptures and to spread Christian teaching, to use these new artifacts as a way of forming Christian people for living well in God's world. We might also think of electricity as another thing which is of significant social change. My view is that these AI advances are in certain ways similar in the impacts they're going to have. And we might look more recently and see social media as something where I don't think the church led the way in how we could use these new tools to form people well. And there are lots of reasons for that, many of them good reasons. But my hope is that the church, and this is an example of that, my hope is that the church can take a lead in offering from the riches of theology ways in which AI tools and systems can be used to help form people well for living Christ-centered lives in God's world. So that's what I hope we will get to.
Wow, that sounds very important. What strikes me in this is the idea that the tools that we use are not just tools that we use, but they actually act upon us in some way, and they change us. Sometimes for the good. That's what we hope, right? But sometimes they also misshape us and distort us and hurt families and hurt relationships and create injury. So that's kind of where we're going to go. All right, so let me start with Gretchen here. Gretchen, how did you become part of this conversation?
God.
All right, can you elaborate on that, please? Just a wee
But
bit.
full marks, right?
It's always the answer in Sunday school. I like to consider myself a bit of an accidental apologist, and I really have such an eclectic background that to find myself here is a little bit of a pinch me scenario. So literally many hats during my professional career, but I ended up being the podcast host for the Microsoft Research Podcast about 10 years after I had started my PhD, and then got into this weird, what am I doing here? I was looking at technology in education, and then I started hearing things about artificial intelligence and the worldview behind it, because most of the people, I'll talk about this tomorrow if anyone's coming to the lectures that we're giving, all of a sudden it started to occur to me that the worldview was basically secular humanism, and it was people saving themselves through technology, and that's not a new topic, right? We've tried to do that forever. We also have to remember that we are fighting an active force that will use these tools to our disadvantage as well. But as I'm listening to these scientists talk about AI, and I'm watching it emerge from the warm-up act to the headliner, I started getting words from God to say, hey, I got something to say about this, primarily in the ethics lane. So I ended up moving into a PhD that was gradually winnowed down to Jesus. And he said, go in with the name of Jesus, and everything fell. The walls of my own private Jericho fell when that dissertation should have been the dissertation that shouldn't have happened. And so I completed it in 2022, in June, and in November of 2022, a little bot called ChatGPT dropped, and everything started to escalate. And so since then, I've been talking about basically the difference between secular ethics and the Christian gospel against the context of AI. Does that answer your question?
That answers, yeah. Toby, same question. Shall I say Pastor Toby? No, okay, no, thank you, okay. Toby, the same question. How did you get started in these kind of conversations? What happened?
For me, my focus of research in my PhD is looking at how, this is 20 plus years ago, I was looking at how the concept of where authority comes from shifts from God and community in that kind of pre-modern period, and then through the Enlightenment and popular pietism, shifts over to like the autonomous individual. And so for me, looking at AI when it comes on the scene, there's this larger framework of anthropology driving ethics. You know, what we think it means to be a human shapes how we act out into the world. And then in my congregation in San Francisco are a number of practitioners that are helping to shape how AI is done. One of the guys that was in my church for a long time is in charge of all like AI safety at Google. And so start realizing what people need first and foremost is not guardrails for AI or like some kind of reactionary positive or negative response. They need a more robust theological anthropology. And so that's been a lot of what I've done in different sectors over the number of years. And so AI, I think, has been a unique opportunity to look at, it's mirroring back to us what our anthropology is in culture and society. And the church is in a unique position, really I would argue, the only hope of the world, because only someone with a Christian anthropology understands what it truly means to be human. And so I think we have a unique responsibility to step up and into these spaces because no one else has adequate.
Do you see churches doing that? Do you see church leaders doing that?
We are mobilizing a lot of that in the Bay Area, and I think a lot of it's being driven by if you want to care for your people, and what are your people doing, and how can I equip them to be where they're called to be. So I would say there's an upswing in the Bay Area in particular with people trying to faithfully minister to their people. But I'm obviously AI is affecting everyone, but in the Bay Area in particular, it's not uncommon to have someone in your church working at one of these major technology companies. We've brought Lyndon out last October, brought Professor Josh Horton out prior to that, who Lyndon works with, to sit with a lot of these people. And this is what's shocking to me. God's got Christians positioned in very strategic places providentially in Silicon Valley, which is amazing and incredible. But then you sit down with them, and there is zero theological training, zero training in theological anthropology. And so where are they going to get it from? They feel the need for it. They'll go take these executive education courses at Stanford or some other prestigious university, and it doesn't do anything for them. And they're realizing it's the church and it's the historic Christian faith that has the answers. And so it's on the church to step up and help provide them.
You guys had a bit of a discussion on the shuttle over here, and I heard it got really interesting. And it had to do with theological anthropology. Lyndon, would you kind of give us a precise or summary of that discussion?
Well, it was the start of a conversation, so we can maybe warm it up a bit later on. I'm going to tell you my point of view because, number one, I happen to think that I'm right. And also, it's really hard to capture well what other people think. So maybe we can each have a go. I have a great appreciation for medieval theologians. I think many of them did work that stood the test of time. But I do think that one area that was unfortunate was an association of the image of God with rationality. And the sense that the image of God is identified with certain human capabilities. And this pains me to say it because on the whole, I love to disagree with Bart. But I think Bart was right in saying that the image of God is tied to the sense of God naming us as image bearers. So it's in God's free choice to make us his image bearers that we become that. And there are other things attached to this. It's a complex thing. But nevertheless, its origins are in God's choice rather than in my abilities. And there's been very helpful reflection from, for example, disability theology on precisely this point. I think most of us, I hope, would react against the idea that a person who experiences disability is somehow less of an image bearer than somebody who happens to be highly intelligent, for example. So this is an ancient question where I think we took a wrong turn, and in terms of popular theological anthropology, and I'm sure Toby can speak to this more, I think that idea still has something of a hold on us when we say things like, AI can't really think, because we imagine that there is some disembodied capacity that makes us truly human, that's different from us as embodied creatures. And so this, I think, affects a huge amount. And I'll give you just one example of the payoff from thinking about this. As AI systems exceed human capacities, as they have done in some areas already, and I think shortly will do in all areas of human intellectual competency, what does that mean about their moral status? And I want to say that natural human beings are a different kind of thing from a more competent artificial thing. And I think preserving that distinction is important, and I think that within Christian theology, there are these other ways of thinking about what it means to be human that we need to recover and then land the practical outworkings of that. So this was as I say, this is my point of view, and then there'll be others here. And by the way, I'm really messing around in this. I'm a biblical studies person, so I have lots of thoughts about, image and likeness, but the systematic theology is really hard. So I'll turn to my colleagues, and they can fill you in on where I've erred.
Gretchen.
Toby's going, you go, Gretchen. I don't think I disagree with you, and we didn't get in a kind of heated discussion. When we start talking with the terminology that some of the makers of AI are using, we anthropomorphize, but also we mechanize ourselves. This is the back and forth thing that we've talked about. I don't know, I would just say in many ways I feel like a human Chinese room, or the AI is been likened to a Chinese room. Do you know that analogy? Which is somebody who speaks Chinese says something into a room which has a man who has access to things in Chinese, but he doesn't speak Chinese, but he can translate and put out an answer on the other end, and it appears like he speaks Chinese. And so even within the AI infrastructure, the makers of AI are using language that they call emergent intelligence, these kinds of things where we don't know how that happened. They're surprised by what their own machines can do. So I get that, but I also, this is where I agree with Lyndon, I think, is that a human person is totally different. And a machine is never going to have the innate, inherent ensoulment of humans. And so where we get on the edges, I think, of what can AI do better than we can, what can we do better than AI, we kind of muddy the waters a little bit, but I just want to say I do agree with you.
Toby, you used the term theological anthropology, which is a mouthful. It is. Tell us a little bit about what that means to you, and then kind of engage Gretchen and what.
So obviously a simple term. It's you can't make sense of what it means to be human without knowing God. Like John Calvin's aware, where knowledge of God starts and knowledge of humanity, that you can't disentangle those. So if you're looking at a Christian anthropology, my understanding of what it means to be a human has to begin with who God is, and then that defines who I am. And the more I understand who God is, the more robust my understanding of myself will be. So you can't disconnect those at all. And so I think that's where even a lot of the Western world is beholden to Christian categories of anthropology, even if they try to present themselves as secular. I mean, the very concept of human rights wouldn't exist, right, if Jesus didn't walk the earth. The idea that every single human being is entitled to dignity and worth and honor and love is a Jesus idea. If Jesus never walks the earth, the whole world probably looks like the Roman Empire in some way, shape, or form. So I think, but it's interesting to me, I've been around tables, first one was probably a year and a half ago with leading practitioners in AI. One of them was this guy, Kevin Kelly, that's been a futurist, they call him in Silicon Valley. And he's an eclectic, really interesting guy, brilliant off the charts. He was actually making an argument around that table, there's 20 of us, that we should think about AI as like an alien life form, and already giving it some kind of anthropomorphized kind of categories. And he's not lacking in intelligence, he's not lacking in knowledge of technology, but clearly what he's lacking in, it's public, but I would say it's Kevin too. I think what he's lacking is a robust theological anthropology. Because if you have that, you can very quickly see that AI is nothing like a created human being. It's something like an image bearer of God.
Yeah.
But we've reduced what it means to be a human to like cognition or rational, decision making, like choice and output. You're worth what you produce, and AI can produce more and think faster.
So what I hear you saying is that a human being that's maybe lost the ability to be rational, or a human being that's lost the ability to think, for whatever reason, maybe a disease process is at work, that's still a human being, right? So we don't say that person is not a human being anymore, or he's not a full human being, or she's not a full human being because they've lost some ability, like the rationality you mentioned, right? Is that a fair?
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is where engaging around AI actually engages other questions where the church has either lost its voice or its confidence or its persuasiveness, because it intersects with issues around life at its beginning and its end in the same way. Because once you do tie image bearing or some other sense of personal worth to capacity, then it turns out that you realize that a newborn baby lacks certain capacities, and somebody who's at the end of their life also lacks certain capacities, and then you might treat them with a different kind of dignity. So AI here exposes, as technological shifts often do, AI exposes other currents that are cutting through society. And as Toby's pointed out, what I'd really want the church to help us do is to recover the sense actually that these debates are debates that come from the Christian tradition. So, but they've lost touch with their moorings. So I think we erred as the church in this sense by emphasizing rationality, but that was once part of a wider Christian debate. And if we can invite other people into the richness of that debate, I think apologetically, that's potentially a very persuasive thing to offer the world, to say we have the grammar for thinking well about what it means to be a human, and we can invite you to become part of a very long-running conversation and debate.
Let's change directions a little bit, and we'll start, Lyndon, with you, and then with you in the middle, and then Toby, and then Gretchen. Tell me about your use of AI. What AI models? I mean, you're not making any money by mentioning Claude, or you're not mentioning any money by but just what do you use?
Well, I think the AI that most of us use most of the time, I'd mention two things. So many of you will have navigated here using a map application. So I've been working in AI for about 30 years. One of the problems that I worked on in AI is tied to how you navigate using maps. It's just that it became a solved problem, so people stopped thinking about it as AI. Many of you use social media. Social media is an AI tool that's been trained very well on how to keep your attention. So most of the time, now obviously in recent conversation, what we mean is chatbots. But AI is a much, much broader field than that. And most of us already use AI in numerous ways every single day. And each of the times we do that, it is forming us in a particular way. And most of that, for most of us, is an implicit act of formation. In terms of chatbots, I use chatbots constantly now. And I'm well aware of their limitations, but I also find them immensely helpful. One of the things that's very boring to do as an academic is to go through and edit something you've written. Obviously, I feel that when the words have flowed out of me, they are wonderful words. And when I have to go back and change them, this is a very tedious process. You know, why would you try and take a diamond and do something to it? Anyway, it turns out the chatbots are very good at pointing out that perhaps the diamond isn't quite polished up properly yet. And I've found it very interesting to use them in that sort of sense of being a critical conversation partner, many other things. But I'll just mention that as one of the things that I've found chatbots very, very useful for.
Turn that back on. I think I had lost the idea that our navigation software really is a type of an AI. Toby, same question. What applications do you use? How does it fit into your work?
Like Lyndon, there's the academic side. I'll mention in a minute. But on the everyday side, ChatGPT has helped us plan amazing vacations. Put my kids' ages in, what their interests are, tell them where we're going, and it'll build out an itinerary. You have to change it, but it's right there doing all that work. Claude, with the ability to do computer programming, has changed so much. So I had a grant a number of years ago to do a geographic information system database. So it's a way of mapping data on a map. Paid a company $80,000+ to build out a user interface that still never worked the way it was supposed to work. This last September, with about 12 hours and 3 days, it produced a better product than 2 years ago a company could do for $80,000. This is a competent company. It wasn't they were really good at what they did. They couldn't solve it. With a minimal knowledge of computer programming, I could use Claude to solve it. And then so I went on to that just for fun stuff. I put in all of my family's meal preferences, the kinds of foods we like, whatever else, asked it to suggest items, that menu kind of items. And so I winnowed that down to like 40, and then built an app where now we can go in the beginning of the week and click the 5 or 6 things we want to have as meals, and it'll kick out in a PDF file the recipes and the shopping list. So just fun stuff. It does just endlessly enjoyable things. On a practical side, I've taken a whole planning document that I'm supposed to present to my board for something and dropped it into one of the AIs that can do PowerPoint presentation, and had it just develop a beautiful PowerPoint presentation. Now you can go back through and see if it's accurate, but it produced something that was visually pleasing. It adequately summarized everything. Something that would have taken, 5 or 6 hours and probably not looked half as good. It does it in minutes. And then on the Claude side, in terms of knowing how to do the prompts and the ability to put your work in and have it evaluate it and suggest revisions, and then look for quotes only from published resources. There's ways of doing it that are very helpful. Someone once told me, probably about 6 months ago, might have been, but to think about these AI chatbots as if someone has given you a graduate research assistant, and how would you use it?
Okay. Do they write your sermons for you, by any way? Yeah.
It can't write a sermon.
Can't write.
It can't write a good one.
Can't write a good sermon. So yeah. Well, that's the debate.
I'm a pastor, so we have to preserve. This is job protection. AI is terrible at sermons. No one should do it.
Well, that's one of the conversations right now. I mean, I've heard pastors sort of debating back and forth about these kind of things.
The other phrase I like, I watched probably 2+ years ago. There was they posted online. It was a conference with people that do PR for the Silicon Valley, and they do technical writing. So these are people the conference was like equal parts terror and excitement. And one of the guys that was saying, he's like, look, it's going to ramp up your productivity, but it can never replace your creativity or expertise.
Yeah.
And I've found that to be true in my experience using it.
Yeah. One of the great conversations that's been going on for a few years in academic circles is exams and papers from students. It's not uncommon for a faculty member to receive a paper, and you start reading it, and within about 3 paragraphs you realize, I'm reading AI. We can spot these things. I want you to know that. We can spot these things. And if we can't, there's an AI program that can spot somebody else's use.
It can't.
It can't? It can't? Really?
Really, really can't. Technically impossible problem to solve. And what you can spot is the people who are using chatbots badly.
They're using it badly. Well, may their tribe increase. I want them to continue to use it badly. So
I'm not telling you,
it.
classical Christian school kids, that you should use it, but if you do use it, take the M-dashes out.
Gretchen, your turn. How do you use AI?
So probably like everyone else, I started with ChatGPT because it was really the only and most famous one, and I got mad at it kind of quickly. Since then, I have a subscription to Grok. I can't afford subscriptions to all of them because I don't have a job right now. Maybe I will. Here's the thing. We are sitting in a room of people who have certain use cases for chatbots that deal with academics, that deal with school, that deal with smart people things. And I think we need to be aware that there's a lot of other use cases that are happening that we may not be aware of because we don't hang out with them. I'm not the target audience. I have learned to write, and so I can compare my writing and my voice favorably to an AI chatbot. I've been disappointed, but that's because my comparison is mine. But I have a daughter who's 27, and you guys are younger than that, and that's the target audience. And I have a daughter's friend who uses it as a therapist. She doesn't want to go to a counselor because it's expensive, and so she regularly takes her anxiety and ADHD problems to ChatGPT. In fact, every time we talk in a group, she goes, well, let's just ask Chat. And it becomes a default mode. So I feel like, and I maybe represent a little bit of a Cassandra voice in this, but I'm looking broader than just how can it help me do my homework or research. in a way that I can then edit and go back to and ask the deeper questions that Lyndon, I think, anchored this conversation on, is what is it doing with us? What is it doing to the generation that's coming up? And that's kind of where my work is going. Yeah, I think we don't quite know what's going to happen yet with the generations that are coming up. Talking to Lynn at lunch, she was asking me, how does the 60-year-old brain learn in a different way than, a younger brain? And I think there's some angle of it that all our brains work the same, but when we come up with a particular technology, we're facile, right? We understand it. And so it's difficult for older people to really understand what AI is all about. I think the younger people are going to teach us a little bit about what you can really use it for. I think we need to be wary of what these uses are and how addictive they can be. Lyndon mentioned social media as something that's designed to keep our attention. Don't think AI isn't that too, and on steroids. So I'm just warning.
You've made the case, Gretchen, about that this is really based upon a particular kind of worldview so much. Would you discuss that a little bit? I want to banter that back forward.
Yeah, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, but what got me all started on it was the fact that the Christian worldview is unique. The Christian worldview is different, not just from quote-unquote secular worldviews, but also from every other religious worldview. And the gospel is good news, not just good behavior. And so what I started seeing was people not just using this or making it to make money. And by the way, there's how many AI billionaires, and people are banking a lot on the success of building out data centers and promises of AI being, the next level of research for curing cancer and things like that. All of this is absent any kind of transcendent power and transcendent morality. And so the worldview, I think we have to look behind the tools to what the people making them believe. And that's where I think we find the Christian worldview, as Lyndon says, has a great story to tell, a better story. Christopher Watkins' book, Biblical Critical Theory, in it he talks about the Christian story out-narrating its cultural rivals, both in the making of AI and in the controlling of AI. So that's kind of where I think we need to anchor some of our thinking is, what do the people making it really believe? And therefore, what do they think its logical end will be? How does that compare to what we really believe and what we know our logical end will be?
Interesting. Any comments on that, about the worldview, the idea?
Yeah, I think alongside that, which I wholeheartedly agree with, again, to have the confidence to say that we can out-narrate other worldviews is incredibly important. But I would also want to say that I think in the West, in the cultural West, the different competing worldviews, I think also have an ancestry in Christianity. So Tom Holland's book, Dominion, if you've come across that, makes this case really well, that in fact, many of these people actually hold to distinctives that can only have come from the Judeo-Christian ancestry in the history of thought, but have become now detached from the theological basis that originally presented them. And I think if we can engage in that way, then it's also possible to affirm those true things that we can see. So I think there's an enormous optimism in much of the tech world that's always captivated me. And Christians are by nature optimistic because of the sense of an eschatological trajectory. Now, where you locate your eschatological hope is in fact very, very important. But at least to engage with that, I think, is an interesting thing. And I would contrast this with, say, 10 or 15 years ago, when the new atheists seemed to be dominant. And that was a very different kind of conversation. So I find it much easier to talk to a secular materialist who has eschatological hope located in machines than I do to talk to a sort of radical new atheist who rejects any kind of transcendent vision.
Right.
Yeah.
Toby, thoughts about that?
I think a newer version that's a little bit more accessible and more apologetic is Glenn Scrivener's The Air We Breathe, which makes many of the same arguments, but it's very accessible and very much can help equip you as an apologist as you're having those kinds of conversations. But I think some of the stuff that, to Gretchen's point earlier, some of the numbers on the number of kids on the upswing that have quote-unquote AI friends or companions, which are like custom AI companions that they can design. And I was at about a year and a half ago, was at a gathering, a bunch of tech entrepreneurs and startup people. One of the companies was called Replica. And her goal, she was saying, was to try to socialize kind of the incel or the lonely outcast. But someone asked her this question after she did her presentation. They say, because her premise was, I want to train people how to do relationship better. And then someone said, can their AI companion disagree with them? And she said, no. You're like, well, how can that prepare them from any relationship I've ever seen, other than my marriage, which is just perfect harmony? But it's not real, right? Like, if your AI can't disagree with you, you can't have real relationship. And if you've designed it, it's not relationship.
You see that too in the chatbots. If you've ever confronted it saying, well, this isn't right, what do they say? Oh, my bad, you're right. I'm sorry I made that mistake. Let me try again. And sometimes you get in a loop with them making the continued mistake. Like, I did ask ChatGPT, can you make me a PowerPoint presentation? It said, yes, I can. And then it didn't. And then I confronted it, and it says, okay, no, this time really. And it didn't again. And it went on several times. And that's when I said, okay, Sam Altman, I'm done with you. We're over. We break up. Problem is, the same thing happened on Grok. And so there's this representation, and they are trained to agree with you, to say, I'm the one who's bad, I'm so sorry. This is not training for the real world.
And tragically, even for that's the premise of a lot of those suicide cases, right? It led people down the road. I mean, it's horrible.
So that gets me thinking about what you were just saying. Are we ever sort of engaging artificial intelligence when we don't know? In other words, there are these things that we decide, I'm going into this and I want to engage it, but does it ever come at us and we think we're talking to a real person, but in fact we're not talking? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And increasingly that is going to be true. I mean, many of you will have encountered, we went from one awful situation, which is speaking to somebody in a call center, who doesn't know how to deal with your problem. And now instead you're speaking to a chatbot. And if you're really lucky, you can persuade the chatbot to upgrade you to somebody in a call center. And is this really civilization advancing? It's super unclear to me. But I don't think we're that far from it being indistinguishable. So we can produce images that are indistinguishable from reality. We can produce videos. It takes only a few seconds of listening to somebody's voice to produce an indistinguishable voice clone, even to people who know the person very well. And so AI is littered with the disasters of people trying to predict the future in any detail. But here we're not predicting the future. We're talking about the present reality. So indistinguishable AI systems are more or less here and will increasingly become part of life. What, to me, that raises, though, is an enormous social question, and there's a question here around our societal consent or choice of this, and there's also the question, which I think, again, invites Christians and the church to engage, which is to say there is going to be enormous social upheaval as a consequence of this, and how are we pastorally prepared to speak into that? And I don't have great answers to that, but these are the things that are going to come up.
Yeah, and I would add to the point of can we engage with it and not know, there are certain segments of the population that are more vulnerable to being fooled by AI, and they've had examples of someone's voice, like a grandchild's voice, calling their grandparent and saying, I'm stuck and I need money and you need to send it here and blah, blah, blah. And it sounds exactly like them, and so there's been many cases of that. But I also think that there's this cynicism that AI is starting to breed. Many refer to it as AI slop, on the internet that is AI-generated content, and if you know one of the current occupations of the day, it's a content creator on social media. Now you can do it with AI applications, and then you get people asking, well, is that AI? Or worse, that's AI. And so as it gets better and better, and you're less discerning, you either are believing everything or you're believing nothing. And I think this is where truth, incarnational truth of Jesus, and the Christian church engaging in real life is a super important thing. I said to my mom, and probably someone will tell me I'm wrong, but right now the main place we encounter AI is on a screen. The reason I said that is because my mom stayed with me over Christmas, and we went on YouTube and got Christmas carols with like scenery of birds and snow and fireplaces. And then we noticed on one that when you went inside the church, very much like this, it was snowing inside the church. It just didn't stop snowing. And then my mom's going, how does that happen? I said, Mom, that's AI. She goes, really? And so we struggled with then for the rest of the vacation going, well, what's AI and what isn't? If it's not on a screen, I mean, you're going to see AI on a screen. The more we unscreen, the less likely we'll be encountering something that would cause us to question it. That's probably not possible. And you're going to talk about embodied AI.
No, I think it actually is going to put more of a priority on people wanting to have more of a lived experience, like in community with other people. I have a friend that's a very popular podcaster, and he's halfway jokingly considering shutting the podcast down and doing a weekly tape subscription service where you can sign it up and he'll send it to you through the mail. You put it in your old Walkman and listen to it, and it's going to be, it could take off, right? Because like people want this tactile, real thing, and if they're on a screen, to Gretchen's point, they don't know if they're getting that.
It's a back to nature movement, but with computers.
Many people sort of have been critical of the church over the last 40 years for getting behind on the gender and sexuality questions. Is there a way for us to get ahead? And what I'm hearing you positively saying is that we do have people who are there, but how do we get ahead of the conversation rather than getting so far behind so that we're thought leaders rather than thought followers?
I think you should found a Center for Collaboration on AI and Theology at Oxford.
Well, I mean, I think, both Toby and Gretchen have had a lot of contact with the people who are in fact forming this, and we could be grateful to God that many of the people who have taken a lead in developing new AI techniques and systems are devout Christian people. And so we're not divorced from it in the same way that we would once have been from certain other moves. So I'd say social media was different to my mind. It was a different kind of thing. I think those questions of being ahead or behind are very, very complicated, in that the way that society goes is a very poor guide around a moral direction to take. But when we're dealing with technology, rather than, for example, a theology of human sexuality, there is something genuinely new that's coming. And that does pose different kinds of questions. My instinct, though, is that a way of getting ahead is, in fact, to look backwards. So I think that Christian theology, we've been thinking about these questions for a long time, and I think we have good, robust answers. So more theological study, more engagement with Christian theologians is important, as long as we also do this as a conversation with those who have the expertise in this new technological field. So, a number of people here have doctoral degrees. You will know that there are very few people in the world. Once you've gone that far down the rabbit hole, there are very few other people who want or can, in fact, go that far down the rabbit hole with you. And these experts have expertise that you can't get at just by, listening to a couple of podcasts or something like that. So we need this conversation between the people who are the technical leaders and the theologians. I'll pause there for the moment. But there's other thoughts.
So what I'm hearing you say is more people going to school to study theology. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
And science.
And science.
Yeah.
David, let me interject. if I may?
How about you guys?
Or were you going to give them a private lecture?
Say it again. No, I'm just having fun with them. No.
I think we have a tendency to capitalize letters like society and culture and the church. And God looks at individuals and asks them to step up to the plate. And so while we have big things going on with groups that are taking the lead in societies and institutes, I think each of us as Christians have to say, what am I doing in my sphere of influence? And even theology with a capital T is something great to study. We need to understand how the wonderful thinkers over the ages, starting with the apostles and the writers of the Old Testament did. But I fall back on pray is greater than prompt, and Bible is greater than LLM. And so I would...
LLM means?
Large language model or chatbot. I
Okay.
just... We inquire of our AI idols now, and even before we pray. And so as a creative thinker and writer and speaker, I like my voice, and I don't want to outsource it to a bot. And there's a line from The Little Mermaid, which is...
I love that movie.
Ursula, the sea witch, is negotiating with Ariel to give up her voice so that she can become human and get the boy of her dreams. And at the end, she's very exasperated, and she says, I'm a very busy woman, and I haven't got all day. It won't cost much, just your voice. And I feel like AI is sort of luring us into that. Let me do that for you. Let me help you with that. And I feel biblically that the struggle is important, and that who was I talking to at lunch about persecution? And the church grows when there's trouble. The church grows when it has to stand. And so I would say to the group over there that you were talking to, you are the next version of what the church will do in this time, but it's individual. Don't look at it as an outsource to some vague, capitalized institution. Just engage where God calls you to in the AI space.
Well said, well said. Let me start over. Okay. It's often said that when there's a technological advance, ethics doesn't lead the way, but it, again, comes behind. How do we think ethically about this, and what questions should we be asking, Toby, right now, that we're not asking?
I think that comes back to something we mentioned earlier, where I think anthropology drives ethics. So what you think it means to be a human shapes how you treat other human beings. And I think we've had a thin anthropology, or really a deficient anthropology, even in the church. We've turned many churches into consumer-based things. Everything has been, I won't say everything. In many churches today, and I love the church, I've been a pastor for a long time, in many churches today, we have something that looks more like a concert followed by a life coaching TED Talk with maybe a little bit of invitation to salvation at the end, which is hardly like an equipping and formation of a deep, robust theological anthropology saying you can't make sense of any part of your life without Jesus. And so how are you, incorporating who Jesus is into everything in your life, your career, your family, into how you're thinking about it? Formation is something the church has done historically so beautifully well, and I think it's not happening as much today because we're distracted, we're individual. And I think there's going to be, hopefully, this resurgence of coming back into community, coming back into places where you can be deeply formed, and then have people that are willing to step up and do the work to do that equipping.
Other questions we ought to be asking right now that we're not asking? Or are we asking the right questions?
Well, I'd probably just want to pick up on Toby's point there around formation and how we do it, and the embodied forms that we give to that. And partly, there's two aspects to this. One is I love coming to the US partly because, unlike England or New Zealand, you haven't gone down the de-Christianization path to the same amazing effort that we have in England and New Zealand. So you've got so much more money in the bank here, less so in San Francisco and Seattle, but here at least, you're not starting from scratch in the same way that it feels like we have to in New Zealand, especially England to some degree. But there have also been cultural trends here, even within the church, that in order to respond and redeem the situation, I think some of these effects can help us to raise important questions. So one of them comes back to this whole question of simulation. We've often tried to scale up things that I don't think ought to have been scaled up. And this is also tied in with Toby's point around formation. You can't do Christian formation at certain kinds of scale. And the church used to do Christian formation very, very well. And in the midst of seeking certain wonderful goods, then we've lost touch with that. And I think what's going to happen is, when it becomes possible not only to encounter a pastor of your choosing online, but in fact to create a simulated pastor who meets your every preference, it's going to utterly destroy these kind of high-scale models of church. And to my mind, that's a good thing. Now, I realize I'm being a little bit provocative here, but I'm also taking comfort from the fact we're inside a building that reflects the long Christian tradition. Most Christians through history and most Christians around the world today worship in buildings that have been deliberately formed in a pattern like this one. And this is a theological pattern that reflects both on the God that we worship and on how we can form people well as Christians. And it has certain goods to it and certain costs. And one of the costs is you can't fit very many people in here. One of the goods is the minister of a church this size knows everyone in their congregation and it is a pastor to them. Now, those are two very different theological ideas about what it means to be human, about who God is, and what the vocation of pastoral ministry is. And that's going to intersect rapidly and very significantly. We could also talk about education. Education is going to have the same kind of effect going on. So I think, to my mind, I welcome this. AI is going to raise questions that Christians have good answers to, as long as we have the confidence to re-inhabit the Christian tradition.
Yeah. It's worth noting that the things Lyndon talked about in terms of numbers and filling pews and growing and scale, that's the driver behind technology. Will it scale? You know, and so I think we've got this mentality, like I mentioned earlier, of anthropomorphizing machines, but also mechanizing humans. And I think this has come into the church as well. Growth, numbers, giving, money. I think the best thing you can do to a Christian organization is not give it very much money, because then it has to figure out, like an engineer, how can we do this in a better way with smaller resources? I looked at Jesus when he's standing in front of the crowd of 5,000 and he only has a couple fish and a couple loaves. What does he do first? He looks up and he says, "Thank you for this," and then God multiplies it. I'd want to add one more thing that I forgot to say is, in this idea of what can AI do in Christian churches, there have been big questions about, should it write your sermons? Should it do these other kinds of things? And recently, I don't know if you know this, a guy who's a worship leader had AI write a prophecy. And then he used it. He gave a prophecy because he was on the Pentecostal side of Christian expression. And then he got caught. Somebody said, "Oh, this is AI." And that's a big scandal. And you go, okay, where do we leave room for the Holy Spirit in many of these practices, including writing sermons, including inspiration for prayer, including prophecy, etc.? So I think AI, as Lyndon says, is revealing the questions that we can now talk about with new authority in this space.
One of the words that we've used a lot here has been formation. Formation of human beings, formation of Christians and such. And not everybody here might be familiar with that language. I grew up in a tradition where we talked a lot about discipleship, becoming disciples. But we didn't use the word formation. Is that roughly the same thing, formation, discipleship, or are we talking something else altogether? Pastor? I'll start with Pastor Toby. Well, both of you pastors, right, both of you pastors. You're not a pastor?
I'd say they definitely are intending to get at the same goal, which is to conform you in the image of Christ. In the traditions I was raised in, or came up through my adolescence anyway, discipleship was probably more about the impartation of intellectual knowledge than it was a life shaped and formed by Jesus. Now, I'm grateful for that intellectual knowledge, but there wasn't so much of an emphasis on how you live it out. Now, I think there's probably an overcorrection where there's a lot of books and things out now where they make formation about just kind of like doing things that Jesus did, and Jesus did a lot of teaching. So truth is really important as well. So I would resist any pulling apart of those two things. Like you need to know, and then you need to do. The head and the heart are always obviously intended to work together.
Yeah, and discipleship has the great virtue that it does have a biblical origin for the term, and this is important. Formation has the usefulness that you can use it in educational contexts that are secular as well. And so it's become a bit of a go-to word that I find helpful because it opens up the possibility that we're not just selling a commoditized education product where people pay for a service, you deliver certain pieces of knowledge, and that's the outcome. And so I find it useful. I'm a bit nervous about it because of some of the things Toby's alluded to, and even beyond that, I think in Christian circles, it's almost become about having the right aesthetic. So, you have the cool building, and, I've got a lot of friends who have suddenly got into liturgy. I'm not sure they're really approaching it theologically, but they love the vibe. And so, formation as a vibe.
The liturgical vibe.
Yeah.
That would be a good band, wouldn't it?
I guess so,
Band name? I
yeah.
don't know.
Maybe it's we could have an AI come up with, some music for it. And yeah, there's a whole terrible track to go down that we shouldn't go down.
Yeah.
But do you know what I mean? I think formation has certain advantages as a term, but so does discipleship, and in different contexts might determine which one works.
Because I want to make sure that kind of everybody's kind of tracking with us. And this is kind of a silly question in a way, but would Jesus use AI? I mean...
Well, he has the mind of Christ. I mean, it's the one that invented the universe. I suspect he wouldn't.
You don't think he would? But I'm thinking,
In terms of a what would Jesus do kind of thing?
Yeah, what would Jesus do kind of? Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty important ethical idea.
I heard a great analogy comparing a gym, G-Y-M, to a job, J-O-B, and AI in the mix of it. So if the point is for the weight to be lifted, you're not in a gym, you're in a job. If the point is for you to lift the weight, you're in a gym, not at your job. So I think there's a little bit of a, what's the point of AI and what are the rationale behind? Because I'm not anti-AI necessarily,
Right.
but I do think we have to address motivation and is this good for me, not just good.
Right. And what is it again doing for me to engage with these technologies?
What do you think?
Such a
Would
way?
Jesus use AI?
Well, he was an artisan, undoubtedly used tools. It's a tool. So I'd say unquestionably it would. But the question I think as well is that it's easy to start thinking in quite binary ways about some of this. And the language of affordances is often useful. So there are certain things that are afforded by a tool, and those can help. And this is why the language of formation is useful. We're always being formed, whether we lift the weight because we're in a gym or because we're doing it as part of our job. Some of the same effects happen to our bodies as a consequence. And so when we use tools, some of the same effects happen to us. So these choices, we are given moral capacity, we're given the capacity to exercise wisdom. I often wonder, in my own case, why God has given me that capacity. It would certainly be a better world if he simply dictated to me what to do, but he's given me that capacity. And so in the exercise of judgment around how I use tools, how I give consideration to their different affordances and those effects, then I am being changed as a person, and that can lead to my desires and my becoming more ordered in the way that I will one day be when the Lord returns, or more disordered away from that. And in this age of the world, we're always going to experience a mix of that ordering and disordering. But my moral responsibility is to seek those things which take me more towards the person I will one day be as an image bearer, and not further away from it.
Toby, any thoughts about that?
I have no idea.
No idea. Would Jesus use AI? Well, you work with people from Silicon Valley. What are they thinking these days? Your congregants, are you influential? Are they giving you the opportunity to be influential in these conversations? What's happening in their minds and lives as they are some of the people who are pushing technologies of all sorts ahead?
There's been a massive resurgence of spiritual hunger in Silicon Valley in ways that have moved so much more rapidly than anyone would have ever predicted. So some of that's increased church attendance. Some of it, a friend of mine started this Center for Faith Work and Tech, and they do an annual conference. Their second one was this year. The first one they struggled to fill. The second one, it's sold out quite quickly. There's a hunger for people to come and find out. I've got a couple of new believers in my church that are very much in the midst of these fields. One of them works in a company that Sam Altman just started, and he was like employee number 3. And he is a fairly new believer and wrestling deeply with how to build this into the foundation of how he does what he does. So I think if anyone has any ounce of humility in them, they recognize pretty quickly they're out of their depth, and the decisions they're being asked to make, they haven't been equipped to make, and that is leading them back to these questions of what it means to be a human being and leading them back into a deeper engagement with their faith as they try to seek those answers. I think it's been an incredibly encouraging time in Silicon Valley.
As a pastor there, you feel encouraged at this point?
Yeah, I mean, their joke in that Silicon Valley series years ago was that it was practically illegal to be a Christian in Silicon Valley. Yeah, but I mean, it felt like that for a minute. I mean, one of the things that was interesting when we did that AI conversation with 20 around the table, 2 of the people at the table had worked at Google, one of them for 20 years, and he was not aware of any other Christian coworkers. Partly because he just kept his own faith kind of under wraps and tried to kind of stay safe, and partly because in his imagination, certainly there couldn't be believers here. It's just too hostile of an environment. And so now they're finding each other, they're having conversations, they're engaging, and there's a lot of incredible ministries going on with these employee resource groups, and there's a lot of equipping happening. So I think it's overwhelmingly encouraging. Not sure I'd call it a revival, but it's certainly a measure of awakening going on in Silicon Valley right now.
Let's talk about greatest hopes and fears as we conclude. We got a few more minutes left. Let's start about fears and then hopes. Do a little bad news for the good news. We've heard some good news here. Gretchen, we'll start with you. Your greatest fear about AI and tech.
In 2023, in October, I was here and John Lennox was sitting there, and this same question came up. It's like, what's your greatest fear? And I was kind of glib and flippant and said, well, God's in charge and he's sovereign, so I'm not really afraid of anything. And and then John Lennox goes, well, I'm actually afraid of, a totalitarian overtake with, bad actors using AI and causing all kinds of havoc. And that's a fair one. I feel like we still have hope in Christ. We always have hope in Christ as Christians. And come what may, that's our call, is to proclaim the good news of Jesus. And so I like the fact that this conversation has kind of revolved around what AI is doing for good. We've seen some affordances and some things that it's helping us, but ultimately, I think my biggest fear was that it would be kind of overtaking in bad ways. The other thing I'll say, even as I use the term bad actors, there's a guy in the UK, now I can't remember his name because he was in my PhD cohort, but he says, everyone else is always the bad actor. It's never me, right? And so I think we have to recognize our own sin and our own capacity to do ill with and for a technology. So that would be another thing I would think of, is just where am I allowing myself to be pulled along by AI applications and tools and thinking, and where can I anchor myself more in the Word of God and in prayer?
Toby, same question.
I'll just read a quote to kind of answer that. This was written back in 2000 in an essay called Life is a Miracle by Wendell Berry, who's kind of the poet, farmer, prophet. Year 2000, 25 plus years ago. It is easy for me to imagine that the next great division of the world will be between people who wish to live as creatures and people who wish to live as machines. And so I think that's where recovering that robust theology or theological anthropology and helping Christians see what it is, so that flows out of the church and helps the world see what it is to be fully alive, which is to be in communion with your Heavenly Father and the body of Christ, and showing someone that anything short of that is a deficient way of existing.
Wonderful.
And I think my greatest fear is huge technological shifts tend to produce social disruption in ways that's very hard to predict. But the consequences of the social disruption have been seen many times in history. And I think we're in the middle of that already, both at the level of local society, where things have become more polarized, at the level of geopolitical conflict and tension. And I fear for what that will do to many vulnerable people. So almost by definition, most of us here are fairly high agency people. We may be affected, but we're not those who are most at risk. But many people around the world will be affected without any agency at all. And I do fear for them.
It's fair. What about changing it up? What the greatest hope? What is your greatest hope based upon this technology? Gretchen, you want to start again? Or do you want to be last?
Well, it's not a matter of first or last. It's just I don't know what to say right now.
Okay. I thought I just said that, but maybe I didn't.
No. I need to think more.
I need to think more about that. Toby, do you want to go forward?
I think for me, the greatest hope is it's pushing questions of what does it mean to be a human back to the forefront for the first time in generations. And that's a unique opportunity to step in with the gospel and the person and work of Jesus.
And so we could see something moving from a quiet awakening to a revival in a way.
That's the hope. I mean, there's more going on spiritually in the Bay Area now than there has been in the entire history of the Bay Area.
Really? That's interesting. Lyndon, what thinketh thou?
I mean, very, very, very similar. I would say, Gretchen's PhD, the fact that she was able to do a Christian PhD at an institution that once would have been resolutely opposed, probably still was while you were doing it. I don't want to really want you to grasp what Toby's been leading in the Bay Area strikes me as something that's an incredibly significant movement, both in terms of scale, but also the way that the Lord seems to be doing something there. So my hope is similarly that there's something about this moment that leads people to have an openness to the message of the gospel that they might not have otherwise had. Now, I mean, we've got the parable of the sower. The enemy desires to oppose this, but I feel as if there is a different conversation. 15 years ago, people were very surprised to find out that I had some academic background and was a Christian, because the default assumption was, if you're a Christian, you're stupid. And I've now got two conflicting pieces of information, and I don't know how to resolve them about this person. And it really feels to me like something's shifted around that, and I praise God for that.
Yeah, exactly what these guys said is AI has given us a moment where it has escalated and amplified the questions that people have asked for centuries, millennia, and it's given, for my own personal experience, it's given me a boldness, which I prayed for. If you look at Acts chapter 4, after the apostles are getting beat up and put in jail, what do? They pray for boldness to keep on talking. And that's all. It's like, give us boldness to speak. So I think AI is bringing up questions that people are really wrestling with. And Christians, if you pray for boldness, we get to be in that arena. And we might get a bloody nose or two, but I think that it's a great moment, as Lyndon says, to be alive as a Christian.
These are some remarkable people with great wisdom. Would you thank them for being with us today? Tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, right back here in the Stone Chapel, Lyndon Trake will give the keynote address for the weekend. We're excited about that, very pleased. And I hope you're registered for that. And if you've not registered for that, Jenny, is there still time? Jenny, are you here? As she stepped out, okay. I'm going to say there's still time, okay. Now, Jenny might tell me know later on, but there's still time. If you have not registered, please do so. And if you have a brief question, these folks have a lot to do this rest of this afternoon. If you have a brief question, come up, ask it, say hello to them, and thank them as well. And we thank our students for being here as well. Delightful. They will inherit the planet. They will inherit the world that we bequeath them. On the way out tonight, be sure to shake a holy hand, hug a holy neck, would you? Is it tonight? Does that say tonight? What did I say? Okay, tonight. No, today. It's dark outside, getting dark outside. At any rate, on the way out, please do greet one another and make everyone feel warmly welcome to the Linear Library and Learning Center. Thank you.
Brilliant. It works great. You guys are great.
Lectures are with
Different groups, small group. Yeah, smaller group, 25, 30, 35 people, something like that.
where are they going to be?
We're going to be in the other building. We're going to be actually in the Harry Potter Hall.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, fun.
We're gonna be up there, yeah. We started doing most of our coursework up there because the camera work is so much better. There's 6 cameras there.
This is adult theology.
Mainly adults. Well, it is all adults. 20 to 70